The Ghost of Silverlode, Part C. When Tom and I climbed through our bedroom window, my oldest brother was sitting on my bed, puffing like a racehorse. Tom and I sat down beside him, and boy, were we puffing too. I never thought I could run more than a mile at top speed, but I did that night. Swin was the first to get his breath. "I hope your great brain doesn't get any more crazy ideas," he whispered so Mama, Papa, and Aunt Bertha wouldn't hear us downstairs. "And don't ever try to tell me again there is no ghost of Silverlode." "My great brain still tells me there is no such thing as a ghost," Tom whispered. "Then your great brain has shrunk down to the size of a pea," Swin said. "We saw the ghost come right up out of its grave, and we heard the ghost. What more do you want? And I didn't see you standing there and telling the ghost there was no such thing as a ghost." "At least I wasn't leading the pack like you," Tom said. "I made sure J.D. got out of there before I knew he was, because I knew he was plenty scared." "And you weren't?" Swin said sarcastically. "Why should I have been?" Tom asked. "Did you ever hear of a ghost who physically harmed anybody?" "Then why did you run?" Swin asked. "Because my big academy brother ran like a scared rabbit and left J.D. standing there petrified with fright," Tom said. Swin got up from the bed. "Just count me out of any more crazy ideas you get," he said. "I'm going to bed." Tom and I got undressed and into bed. Then a reaction set in on me. I began to shiver and whimper with fright. "Go to sleep," Tom said. "How can I?" asked. "That ghost is going to haunt us for sure for disturbing him. I don't care what your great brain tells you. For my money, that was an honest-to-goodness ghost." "Maybe it was and maybe it wasn't," Tom said. "If it was a ghost, my great brain won't rest until I get a chance to talk to it and find out what makes a ghost, and why they go around haunting places and people. And if it isn't a real ghost, my great brain won't rest until I find out who has been scaring the daylights out of kids and grown-ups all these years." "Well, all I can say is that you're not going to get any help from me," I said. When I woke up in the morning, I was more sure than ever that Tom wouldn't get any help from me. I had nothing but terrible nightmares all night with ghosts chasing me. After we finished our morning chores, Tom went up to his loft to think. This was one time I hoped his great brain had sense enough to tell him to leave Ghost alone. That afternoon we went swimming. Parley, Sammy, Danny, Seth, and Basil went with us. They all looked red-eyed, as if they'd had the same kind of nightmares that I'd had. We talked about the ghost on our way to the swimming hole. Everybody agreed it was a sure enough ghost except Tom. "My great brain won't rest until I find out if it was a real ghost," Tom said. Basil shook his head. If you don't find out last night, you never do." And I said, "Your great brain is never going to get any rest as far as I'm concerned." The others nodded in agreement. "All I want you to do is to go to Silverlode with me again tonight," Tom said. "If we see and hear the ghost again, then I'll believe in ghost. But maybe we all just imagined we saw and heard a ghost last night. How about it?" This time, Tom didn't get any volunteers. "Are you cowards or men?" Tom demanded. "I say anybody who refuses to go is a coward." Tom had us over a barrel. "I'll go." Parley was the first to volunteer. The rest of us had to admit we were cowards or meet Tom outside our barn that night. Well, I sure wouldn't have volunteered if I'd known what Tom planned to do that night. I would have cheerfully let every kid in town call me a coward first, but I didn't know until we went up to our room that night. "I didn't want to tell the other kids, J.D.," Tom said as we waited for the curfew whistle to blow. "But tonight, I'm going to capture that ghost, or whatever it is, and you are going to help me." "Oh, no, I'm not," I said. "The ghost of Silverlode never did me any harm, and won't as long as I leave him alone." "Oh, yes, you are," Tom said. "What are you going to do with a ghost if you do capture it?" I asked, hoping that would make him change his mind. "If it is a real ghost," Tom said, "I'll interview it. I'll find out about ghosts, and Papa can print the story in the Advocate. It will make him world famous. You wouldn't do anything to prevent Papa from becoming a world famous journalist, would you?" "Of course not," I answered. "That is why I knew you would help me," Tom said. "And if it isn't a real ghost like my great brain tells me, I'll find out who has been scaring kids and grown-ups by pretending to be a ghost." The curfew whistle finally blew. We met the other kids in front of our barn. Tom went into the barn where I'd locked up my dogs. When we came out, he was carrying Swin's lariat. Sammy pointed at it. "Why the lariat?" he asked. "I'll tell you when we get there," Tom said. Again we sneaked, without being seen, to the town limits, and then walked to the corner of Whiskey Row and Corey Streets.